Well, we don't know yet if Brad Marchand is going to play. He certainly had a lot to say here on Thursday ahead of Game 6 tomorrow night against the Florida Panthers. We're going to break it down today with Scott McLaughlin of WEEI.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Thursday, May 16th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Game 6 between the Bruins and the Florida Panthers is set for tomorrow night. The Bruins were practicing here on Thursday. Brad Marchand was a full participant after missing games 4 and 5 following that incident with Sam Bennett. He spoke about it after practice. We're going to break down what he said, what his status is, and more coming up here with Scott McLaughlin of WEEI in a moment. A quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. For those of you who may be new to the podcast, I am a lifelong Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for about 20 years now. Was a full-time hockey news editor for The Score for 5 years, and I've been hosting this podcast since 2019. Speaking of 2019, today is the 5th anniversary of the Bruins sweeping the Carolina Hurricanes and advancing to the Stanley Cup final. Can they get back to that peak? Is it a failure of a season if they lose to the Florida Panthers here in round 2? We're going to talk about it all here coming up with Scott McLaughlin. Please do enjoy this chat. All right, happy to be joined on the podcast once again by Scott McLaughlin of WEEI, who was at practice here on Thursday ahead of a huge Game 6 Friday night between the Bruins and the Panthers. How's it going, Scott?
I'm good. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing pretty well. It was good to see Captain Brad Marchand back on the ice today. I know he had a lot to say after practice as well. Can you give us the latest on his status for Game 6 and also kind of his perspective on the Sam Bennett incident that occurred back earlier in the series?
Yeah, so Marchand practiced in full. He went through all the regular line rushes, drills. He was on the power play when they practiced that.
Very nice.
According to him and Montgomery, not 100% cleared, totally sure thing yet.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he's probably back in for Game 6. Montgomery said he looked good. Marchand said he will hopefully be playing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like usually with most injuries, but especially if it is a concussion, like we all kind of think it is.
Yeah.
Usually that final clearance doesn't come until game day. So I think they're being careful. They don't want to say too much just yet.
Right. And then in terms of his perspective on the Sam Bennett incident, what was he saying? He had some interesting things to say. Eh?
Yeah, he had a lot to say. He said he thought he got away with one, obviously.
Yep.
But he didn't rip him. He didn't say, that there was no like, woe is me. There's no feeling sorry for himself. He said that's playoff hockey. He said he's been on the other side of some of those plays.
Yep.
He wasn't going to complain about it. He didn't really have much to say about the league not disciplining him. So he viewed it as playoff hockey. He said that multiple times. He said that's playoff hockey. He said, something that I think is true to him that I don't think the NHL would want him saying, but he said, every shift here, you're trying to hurt guys on the other team. Like, obviously within the lines,
right,
usually, but, listen, Brad Marchand knows he's taken some of those shots at other guys, and he's hurt some other guys from time to time. So he, it's funny for like all the fans of opposing teams who I think over these last few days have wanted to put words in Marchand's mouth and be like, oh, he's a hypocrite or he's gonna be a hypocrite. It's like, nope, he's not. Like, he's gonna be consistent. He in his mind, stuff like this is part of the game, and you got to deal with it and you got to overcome it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was interesting too. I think he could have taken it that extra step and said, like, he's been on the other end of it and had to deal with the supplemental discipline that came along with going over the line. He didn't kind of go that far, I guess, but yeah, still interesting to see him come out and say, guys basically are doing whatever they can to take their opponents out of action there. And within, I mean, obviously not extreme behavior out there, but that Bennett incident certainly was borderline at best. What was your take on that whole incident? Do you think it was a suspension worthy thing, and just the whole not having the angles, the league didn't see it? What was your whole take on the whole Sam Bennett thing?
Yeah, I thought once we had all the angles, I thought it was worthy of a 1-game suspension.
Yeah.
It is kind of bizarre to me that the NHL doesn't have access to every angle that every broadcast had. I think because, we saw it on TNT here in the US, before was that game 4, which was like almost 48 hours later. And TNT said they only had it because Sportsnet picked it up.
Right.
So like Sportsnet, it's like, did Sportsnet know they had it? Apparently the NHL didn't. Emily Kaplan reported that that the NHL didn't have that angle until Sunday when everyone else did. So that, like, all of that is very weird to me.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess at that point you probably weren't going back 3 days later and suspending him, but it was a cheap shot. Like I think he knew what he was doing. I don't know if he thought it was going to concuss Marchand and knock him out for 2 games, but I think he saw Marchand coming at him and thought, I've got a shot here, and he took it.
Yeah.
And to me, it should have been 1 game, and instead you end up with obviously no penalty call on the play, which I don't blame the refs for. None of us saw it in real time.
Yeah.
No suspension, not even a fine. So nothing at all.
And then, of course, Bennett came back and scored that game-tying goal in the game that he should have been suspended from. But I guess that's old news now. The Bruins won Game 5. They're looking ahead to Game 6. Coming up here, as the podcast continues, we're going to talk about what worked in Game 5 and whether or not the Bruins can keep it going here for a couple more games against the Panthers. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're over on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today. News, opinions, analysis from all over the Locked On Sports universe. Free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app as well as on YouTube. All right, Scott. So the Bruins, a huge win in Game 5. I believe Jim Montgomery said it was one of, if not their best performance of the postseason to date. What did you see that the Bruins did in that game that was different from the previous 4 games, or I guess games 2, 3, and 4 at least, where they lost those 3? And how were they able to get the better of Florida in that one?
time, and that comes at both ends of the ice. Like they're doing a better job of killing Panthers possessions,
right,
getting out of their zone. I do think the Bruins, when they've been able to do that, their transition game has been good. Like I think they've been able to get through the neutral zone against this team. The problem is they've had too many shifts where they just get hemmed in.
right.
And then by the time they get the puck and get out, they're just looking for a change.
Yeah.
So it's like transitions out the window at that point.
Yeah.
But I thought they killed possessions quicker. And then they got in the offensive zone and were able to actually set up and hold on to some pucks. Obviously get shots on goal. That had been a major problem for 3 games where they had been held under 20. But it all ties together. Like it's why Montgomery always talks about, building the team game. And it's like, that sounds like a cliche, but it's because it is all like you can't hold on to pucks in the offensive zone and get that time and get more shots if you're not killing the play in the D zone first.
Right.
So I think it started there, and then from there they were able to get their chances. I thought they did a really good job limiting high danger chances. Obviously they got a great performance from Jeremy Swayman, but I didn't think he had to like stand on his head. Like I thought that was a really strong defensive performance from the Bruins. So
yeah,
I would start there, and then the offense and the zone time and all that like stems from that for the Bruins.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so much talk about the Bruins being like a low volume shot team. But still it's been so frustrating and hard to watch. There's been at least 3 or 4 games where they've come out and been, these wide stretches where they don't get a lot of shots or 1 shot or 2 shots in the first period. It was nice to see them and come out and outshoot the Panthers in the first. And I also thought it was obviously one of Charlie McAvoy's best games of the postseason. He was, he led the team in shots in that one after not having a shot, I believe, all series prior to that. I know a lot of people have been wondering if he's injured or he's not had the best playoff. I kind of think that the ice has been so tilted and the defense has been called upon to be like almost perfect in order to counter the lack of offense, that it's kind of been magnified. What was your take on Charlie McAvoy in that game and as the playoffs have gone on as a whole?
Yeah, I thought that was definitely his best game. I feel like some of the talk about his struggles may be a little overblown, but he clearly wasn't at his best. I don't think we had really seen his best in this postseason because we all know what that ceiling is. Like when he's on top of his game, he's a top 5 defenseman in the NHL, top 10 at worst. And he wasn't playing like that. I thought he was playing solid, like not the biggest problem, but you expect a lot more than that from Charlie McAvoy. And you definitely got that in game 5. You mentioned stepping up offensively with the shots. He has set the physical tone. Like that's one thing that hasn't gone away, even when he was struggling a little. But I thought better decisions with the puck, more aggressiveness, assertiveness with the puck. Just looking to attack. That too many times in this series and even in the Toronto series, it would look like he was like hesitating and almost taking himself out of shooting lanes. Like he just wasn't sure if he was quite seeing how things were playing out correctly. And in game 5, it was like no hesitation. It was just forward. On the subject of McAvoy, just one kind of funny thing that came out of today is, he's obviously answered some questions about not having shots and then stepping up. And he was asked about it again today. And I think there's just kind of a small group of us left. And he was like, I actually have had some shots on goal. He was like, I was thinking about it. And I'm like, I've definitely had shots that ended up on net. He's like, I don't know if the shot keeper is just asleep or something. He's like, I know I need to get more through, but there were more than 0.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that in this playoffs. I think it might have been in game 7 against the Leafs where Pasta had 2 shots in the first minute of the game and they just didn't even count those shots.
Right. Yeah.
That. maybe that's part of it too, but he had the big one. It got on net. They need him to keep it going like that. Let's say Brad Marchand is able to play game 6. Obviously a huge addition. Who do you see coming out of the lineup? We talked off mic about Jim Montgomery talking to Johnny Beecher before or after practice today or during practice. Is it going to be him? Is it going to be somebody else? Who do you see being the odd man out up front?
Based on the practice lines, it looks like it's probably Jacob Lauko coming out, but that could change tomorrow. Maybe they line up differently in morning skate, but yeah. So the change, so Marchand went in on a line with Coyle and Frederick, who had been reunited last game, and that looked pretty good with Heinen on their left. Heinen went down to the third line with Zaka and Brazeau. Van Riemsdyk down to the fourth line with Beecher and Maroon.
Right.
Montgomery did have a long talk with Beecher before practice, just one-on-one, kind of up against the boards.
Yep.
But it seems like Beecher's probably staying in. And I asked Montgomery about it, and he said, the message is just that we believe in you, and there's a reason that you're getting these chances. And that stems from, people will probably remember in Game 5, Beecher had a really bad turnover that almost led to a disastrous goal. Like it looked like he just like panicked, coughed the puck up. I think it was Kyle Okposo. Went to right in front of the net all alone. So it seemed to me like it was more of a building him back up and like making sure he's in a good place. Rather, it didn't look like ripping him, like what the hell are you thinking type thing. Like it wasn't that. So it seems like he's staying in, and Lauko might be the odd man out.
Interesting. Yeah, that Kyle Okposo kind of looked caught off guard by the fact that he even had the puck there. If he had been even a bit more aware of the fact that had happened, nobody was expecting it, and that could have been disastrous for sure. I feel like Lauko has been playing pretty well the last couple games that he's been in, bringing some energy. Do you agree with that call? Or I don't know, I'd kind of be leaning more towards, I know Patrick Maroon's kind of a spiritual leader there these days, but he hasn't been, I don't know, super effective. JVR hasn't really stood out that much. Would you go with one of the older guys, keep them in for experience, or take Lauko out just because he's kind of the younger guy that doesn't have as much experience?
Yeah, I think I would probably take Lauko out.
Yeah.
He has been playing what he's been doing what he does well.
Yeah.
He's been forechecking, he's been physical, he brings energy. There's just a lack of polish on his game where you still see times where he just isn't really in the right spot or doesn't make the right play or isn't the most poised with the puck on his stick.
Right.
And I think that's what probably gives other guys the advantage, right? Like you feel pretty good when the puck's on James Van Riemsdyk's stick that he's going to make the right play.
Yeah.
And he does have 5 points this postseason. Same with Danton Heinen coming back in the lineup. I thought he played well in Game 5. Maroon, look, there's definitely times that he looks slow out there and behind the play. But when he's on pucks, he's protecting them. He's holding on. He's making the right play. He gets pucks out of the D zone when it comes up the wall to him. So
right.
I think that I can't really argue against going with the experience in an elimination game of guys who have been there and know what it takes to win a tight game like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's going to be interesting. This will be a conversation for the offseason, obviously, but whether or not guys like Heinen, Van Riemsdyk, even Maroon will be back next season, if they'll try to carve some room up for them. Hopefully we don't have to talk about that for quite a while, though. Any changes on defense coming up, you think, or they're going to stick with the same 6 that they went with in Game 5?
Definitely looks like they're sticking with the same 6. I'll be interested to see, how they actually line up because Montgomery did change things up a little in Game 5. You saw a lot of Wotherspoon and Carlo together and a lot of Lori and Peak. In practice today, it was back to Lori, Carlo, Wotherspoon, Peak, and Lindholm McAvoy still, loaded up on the top pairing.
Yeah.
So, but you can play around that in game depending on situations and matchups and all that, but definitely seems like they've settled on this as their 6, which I think is the right call. Like I do think these are their 6 best, with all due respect to Forbort, Shattenkirk, Grzelcyk, who, all have different things that they can bring, but this feels like a well-rounded 6-man defense that, especially for this series.
It's interesting, like talking about the experience up front, they're going with a pretty fresh 6 with like Witherspoon, Lohrei. I don't think Peak has much playoff experience either, so it's interesting to see those guys step up. But yeah, I think that's clearly the right call as well, and it's a nice problem to have in the playoffs, I guess, with 9 healthy defensemen, and we'll see what happens here in game 6, which is tomorrow night. I want to talk about coming up. Let's say they do lose, what the perspective of the whole season is in your eyes, Scott. We'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting Celtics tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA playoff tickets, and it's true of the NHL as well. I love the all-in prices and the view from your seat. You know exactly what to expect when you get to the arena, and their lowest price guarantee means they'll credit you 110% of the difference if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Just create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off at Game Time. Last minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. I guess I did want to touch on one other thing. Speaking of like pending free agents, for me, Jake DeBrusk has looked like one of the best players for the Bruins in this postseason. Do you agree with that, Scott? Do you think he's kind of carved out his importance as part of a core member of the team that they need to keep moving forward, or you think there's still some uncertainty about his future in Boston?
Season, I wonder how it shakes out in terms of his contract and pending free agency, because you can't deny that there is also a lot of inconsistency there over the years. That's it. How I think this goes, and the decision I think the Bruins need to make is whatever DeBrusk is going to end up at salary wise.
Yep.
My guess is you're not really going to find anyone better for the same amount of money in free agency.
Yep.
So if that's the money you have allotted to that spot on the roster, whatever you want to call that, your 4th or 5th forward, or wherever you see him in sort of the spreadsheet of how you're building your roster.
Yep.
That would make sense to me if you're going to keep him then.
Right.
The question is, let's just say it's like $5.5 million on DeBrusk.
Yep.
Does not spending $5.5 million on him, does that help you go land a bigger fish?
Right.
$8-9 million.
Right.
So you have to make those kind of calculations. It's not just, it's not just a 1-for-1 of, okay, well, how does Jake DeBrusk compare to other $5.5 or $6 million players?
Right.
It's can you upgrade? Like, do you have the money to do that?
Right.
So,
that makes sense.
I think they're gonna have to sort through that. I certainly think DeBrusk has helped his case, which I'm sure is gonna feel good for him, because I know he didn't feel good about his regular season.
Yeah.
Nor should he have. So I think there's gonna be mutual interest there. Like I said, I think it's just gonna come down to whether the Bruins feel that there's a better option that they can afford.
Or I guess if another team comes in and just offers him a lot more than what the Bruins were prepared to play him. I know the inconsistency scoring is an issue. I think his his play without the puck is pretty valuable as well. We've seen him. Yeah, who would have thought he'd be killing penalties and killing late game leads and stuff like that. Overall, this season was kind of billed as a transition season. Let's say they lose game 6 against the Panthers, fail to advance to the conference finals. For me, I still think it's overall a pretty successful season, and you've gotten some glimpses of guys who could be pieces moving forward, like Mason Lohrei or Justin Brazeau. Do you think this will be seen as a failure around the organization if they don't advance, or do you think they'll be satisfied with what they've been able to do here, winning a round in this transition season, getting even further than they did last year?
Yeah, I think it probably falls. It'll probably fall somewhere in between. Realistically, I don't think they or anyone can consider it a failure.
Yeah.
You know, with what you lost and the cap constraints that you had, you win a round, and now you've taken the Florida Panthers, one of the favorites all season, to 6 games, and let's see how Friday goes. Maybe to 7. Like,
yep.
You know, still games to be decided here. So
yeah.
Like that can't be a failure.
Yeah.
I also don't think they'd be satisfied though. Like now that maybe going into the year, you would have said like, oh yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Like now you're here, you know, now you're in it. You're one of the final 8 teams. So you're a Stanley Cup contender. So at that point, like anything short of that is at least disappointing. So
yeah, sure.
You probably won't hear the word satisfied, but definitely not a failure. So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think just in terms of, you're this close. You definitely have some holes you can fill in elsewhere. There's still questions about whether or not they have like legit top line center. But I've seen people saying, oh, you know, Montgomery might be gone if they fail or if they don't win. Do you think there has been, like, comparing this playoff run to last year's, where, there was some criticism that you could have placed on the head coach in terms of lineup decisions, not going to Swayman sooner? Do you see kind of growth in his coaching abilities and strategies compared from last year to this year, and see, positive steps moving forward for the coach with this team?
I do. I think some of the lineup stuff is still questionable at times. Like, you go back to the first round, changing the lineup for game 5.
Yeah.
When you just won 2 games on the road, like I get why he made the changes he did, but that just doesn't sit right with me. It's like,
same.
No, like you stick with the winning lineup. But where I think he's grown is I think he's been a lot more hands-on this year. And that's been a full season thing. That's not just playoffs that he's turned that on. That I think that was one of his takeaways from last year, was that while that team had great leadership, he was too hands off, and there were times where he needed to be more involved.
Okay.
And this year he has been, and we've seen that throughout the year, whether it's more team meetings or more individual meetings or line meetings, or being willing to lay into his team at times. With the couple bag skates we saw during the season, or even going. So I think this was also before game 5 of the Toronto series. He stopped practice like 3 minutes in. And told them, guys, we got to pick it up. This isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Like that's stuff that maybe he didn't need to do as much last year because they were so good.
Right.
But I think he probably got to the end and felt like, there were probably times that I should have. Like there are probably times where I saw the play slip and let it slide too long. And this year there's been more of that.
Right.
Okay, it stops here. Like, all right, it's slid for a couple games, for 4 days, whatever it's been. It's time to stop. Like I'm jumping in. So that's where I think I've seen the most growth from him.
I don't know if it falls fully on him or who's to blame here, but those too many men penalties just cannot keep happening. I don't know what is going on. How can they keep doing this? I think it's 6 times now
Yeah,
That's just baffling to me.
It is. It's totally baffling. And yeah, I guess like at the top of the food chain, that has to start with coaches, right?
Yeah.
If it keeps happening, it can be players make the mistakes, but it's on coaches for not getting the message through. Now, and there's been a couple situations where it's like the communication was clearly off, right? Like a defenseman leaves the penalty box. Now there's 3 defensemen on the ice.
Yeah.
One of them has to change off, and a forward and a defenseman come on for him. Like, that's like someone has to make sure that message gets through.
Yeah.
The one the other night in Game 5, to me, is all on the players. Like, it starts with Charlie Coyle doesn't get the puck in deep. He tries to make a side-to-side pass across the blue line that gets picked off.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to know that guys are changing behind you.
Yeah.
Don't try that play in that situation.
Right. Yeah.
And then Peak and Lindholm, it's
Peak.
Peak goes to the bench to go off, but then stays on.
Yeah.
Lindholm jumps on before he gets off, and it's just like I can't put that on Montgomery because
no.
It's like these guys have done line changes their whole life. They're in the NHL. Like you shouldn't have to be telling them one by one every single shift. Like, hey guys, remember how to do a line change? No, they know what they're doing. They're just not using their heads.
Yeah. Well, I think key for Game 6 will be staying out of the penalty box. Hopefully Pasta can get hot. He's only got the 1 goal in this series. But it should be a good one. What are you thinking? One final question. The Bruins are coming home, playing Game 6. You think, they have a good chance to win, but they haven't been like a closeout team on home ice here for quite some time. Is that just a circumstantial thing, or why are they not showing up in these big games on home ice?
I don't know. Listen, if I had that answer, I'd probably be the head coach.
Yeah, exactly. It's just baffling. That's baffling too.
No one seems to have the answer, and it is. And Montgomery was asked about this too because it is happening across the league.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not just the Bruins that are struggling on home ice. There's been a couple series where it's like the road teams won almost every game.
Yeah.
So Montgomery speculated a little about maybe there is more pressure. If you get down a goal, you feel that nervous energy, you feel the crowd almost start to turn on you. Whereas on the road, it's easier to just reset and keep playing your game.
True.
So I don't know, but they gotta, before Game 7 against the Leafs, they did the whole stay in the hotel.
Yeah.
Did their morning skate at the Garden. I believe they're doing that again for this game. So I think they did it, but I think they did that before Game 4 too, and they still lost that game. So, but they did get off to a good start in that game, right? They were up 2-0. So,
true.
In my mind, I'm I feel like that shouldn't really make that much of a difference, but if it does, then great, then keep going with it.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking some time to chat today. Remind our listeners where they can find your Bruins coverage, where they can find you on X, I guess it's called now.
Yeah, so on X at smclaughlin9. You can read my stuff on weei.com. Listen to the Skate podcast. Listen to Sunday Skate on the air. We are going to be doing a 3-hour show this Sunday.
Oh wow!
9 a.m. to noon.
So preview.
Yeah, win or lose. So either Game 7 preview or season wrap up.
Right.
Hopefully Game 7 preview.
Very nice. We'll definitely be checking that out. Scott, thanks again. And we'll catch up at some point, hopefully later on in the playoff run or in the off season at the very least.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Ian.
Yeah, take care.